Hello everyone, Jabberwock here. Today I am presenting you this complete breakdown of the Rift mechanic, but before that, a quick presentation of my account. It was created about a year ago. I wanted to experience the early game on a fresh account, but ended up being more motivated than ever. So I ditched my old account and started grinding on Season. The goal was to reach 1 million time-filled black stones and turn them into loot scrolls, as I didn't have nearly enough to sustain my daily grind. New players may not need thousands of loot scrolls right off the bat, as they will most likely spend the first few weeks or even months exploring the world and following the quest lines that this beautiful game has to offer. But for my part, all I wanted was to set this new account on the right path to the endgame. I tried not to turn this adventure into a race, as most of the choices I made could be seen as counterproductive. I will elaborate on my main goals in a future video. For today, let's focus on the rifts. Rifts, or Rift Echo, are a seasonal mechanic involving summoning 3 waves of random bosses in order to obtain time-filled black stones, crone stones, Valk's Cry, and sharps. There are 2 different ways to acquire these Rift Echo. The first one is simply to process 5 Rift Fragment into 1 Rift Echo. You can obtain Rift Fragments from grinding on seasonal channels. The second way to obtain Rift Echoes is to accept and fulfill one of the season weeklies. You can find a full list of said weeklies by pressing O, then recurring. These weeklies will reward you with a Rift Echo. Okay, you got a Rift Echo. Now what? Simply right-click on your Rift Echo, and it will set a path to the spawning location near Velia. At this point, you have 2 options. The first is to simply right-click the rift at the correct location. This will start the first wave. The second option is to interact with the relic. This option allows you to use up to 3 rifts at the same time, making the bosses way harder but more rewarding. I suggest this method if you find enough players who are also trying to run their rifts. I decided to run my rifts the first way for one simple reason: I had 900 rifts to run and didn't want to recruit every time someone in the party ran out of rift, as the second option requires each member of the party to input the same amount of Rift Echo as the party leader. This mechanic was introduced years ago when players would pretend like they were going to use their rifts once it would be their turn to summon, but instead simply left the party and leeched off of other people's rifts. Well, it wasn't exactly for the rifts that this mechanic was added. It was for Pila Scrolls, Relic Scrolls, and the Forbidden Books. But the rifts function in a similar way, and so they got the same treatment. Okay, you got your Rift Echo, you are at the correct location, and you chose the method to run it. What can you expect now? There will be 3 waves of bosses. During the first wave, you will encounter one of the 3 basic bosses: Beg, Red Nose, or the Sonal Captain. A second wave will spawn once the first boss has been slayed. This second wave has the exact same pool of bosses, but you cannot encounter the same boss that you faced during the first wave. For the final wave, you will have 90% chance of facing Cavalli and 10% chance, according to my tests, to face Paturum. You also have a 5% chance, again this is according to the data collected during these rifts, to trigger a bonus wave. This wave will always happen between the second and final wave, no matter what boss you faced. This bonus wave will spawn 3 waves of 7 treasure hunters. Pay close attention, as they will try to flee as soon as they spawn, and you will lose the loot of each that escaped. Once you have killed the last of the treasure hunters, a giant treasure chest will appear. If you are running rifts in a party, make sure to hit the chest at least once, or else you won't get any loot from it. The chest dies quickly, so you should always be ready for it after the 3rd wave of Goblin. Note that this bonus wave is just that, a bonus. You will still have a 3rd boss wave after the treasure chest has been opened. But what about the rewards? The first 2 waves only spawn the 3 basic bosses. Each will drop 12 to 16 time-filled black stones. For the 3rd wave, Cavalli will drop 25 to 30 time-filled black stones, as well as 2 sharps. If you are lucky enough to encounter the rare boss of the 3rd wave, you will be rewarded with 75 to 80 time-filled black stones, 8 to 15 crons, 1 to 2 Valk's Cry, and 2 sharps. For the bonus wave, you can expect 8 to 12 time-filled black stones, as well as 1 cron stone per goblin that you manage to hit and kill. If you are in a party, make sure to hit as many as you can to maximize the loot. The giant treasure chest will drop 55 to 65 time-filled black stones, 15 to 25 Kronstones, and 2 to 4 Valk's Cry. Honorable mention for the 20, 30, and 40 stacks that can drop from the rare boss and the chest. 20 and 30 stacks are pretty much irrelevant nowadays, as you can make low stacks from Blackstones. The 40 stacks are good but extremely rare. I only got 2 in total. I also didn't mention the rates of each Tuvala accessory that drops from any of the bosses, simply because only Pry Duo and Try give a significant amount of time-filled stones once melted. So if your inventory is full and you have no way of freeing slots, simply delete or melt the base Tuvala accessories that you got so far. Base Tuvala accessory will yield 10 time stones once melted. Pry will be 20, Duo 40, and Try 60. There is no point in keeping these accessories, as only one set of Tuvala accessory will be converted once you graduate, and it should be the set of Pen Tuvala that you are wearing. Also important to mention that when graduating, all your time-filled black stones will be deleted, as well as your rift fragments and any additional Tuvala accessory or Tuvala equipment other than the highest set you have been able to enhance during your seasonal adventure. Therefore, even if you plan on making a new seasonal character right after graduating on your current one, you should melt every additional Tuvala accessory and trade your time-filled black stones at your nearest Fugar. This leads me to my next point, and it's a crucial one, so stay tuned. Why would anyone run 900 Rift? This seems to be the question people ask themselves when I posted about it on Reddit not long ago. People seem to think the rewards didn't match the effort to run that many, which prompted a need for me to explain why I think running rifts may be the best possible use of your time if you enjoy grinding a lot. If you remember at the beginning of this video, I said this was a new account. It means no loot scroll stockpiled from years of events. I knew I'd need to grind every day if I wanted to catch up. I had at most 5 hours a day to allocate to it and knew a level 1 loot scroll wasn't going to be fast enough. I needed to grind with level 2 running at all time. That's when I decided to grind on season using only a level 1 scroll or even no scroll at all when there was a drop rate event going. That way, once I'd graduate, I would be able to start grinding mid to end game content with a level 2 loot scroll. At high-end zones, the difference between a level 1 and a level 2 loot scroll is about 200 million silvers. This number varies from spot to spot, class to class, and obviously from how many trash drops you get an hour, with some spots where the difference is closer to 300 million. That's 10 to 15% more silver per hour, and it only requires you to consume 1 more loot scroll every hour. Quick math tells us that 5 times 2 is 10. That means I was going to consume 10 loot scrolls a day for a while. There are many ways to obtain loot scrolls. I won't list them all here, but even if you were to do every activity that rewards you with them, and you did that every single day, you still wouldn't generate 10 loot scrolls a day. Another way is to pay real money for it. The usual rate is 1 loot scroll for $1. You can't buy them directly from the Pearl Shop, but very often you will see bundles that contains them as a bonus. You are in fact buying something, and the loot scrolls are just a side reward. If you see a bundle that contains something you don't need at all, but you see that it also rewards you with 10 loot scrolls, look at the price and see if you are interested in spending money for them. I don't suggest that anyone spend real-life money on loot scrolls, but if all else fails, it's better than grinding without a loot scroll at all, at least in my opinion. Depending on the speed at which you run rifts, you can expect anywhere from 4 to 15 loot scrolls an hour in the form of time-filled stones. You can exchange 300 time stones for 1 loot scroll. During the 21 hours it took me to run 900 rifts, I made the equivalent of 246 loot scrolls, along with 1,853 sharps, 2,050 Kronstones, and 273 Valk's Cry. Speaking of which, the Valk's Cry were also something I was going to need in large quantity to increase the stacks I was going to use to enhance my gear once I graduated. These Valk's Cry can be obtained from only a few ways. Melting costumes is one of them, but I don't recommend it. If you go that way, then you can estimate that 1 Valk's Cry is worth 3 crons, meaning that each is worth at least 6 million silver. Of course, I'm sure plenty of you guys are scuffing behind your monitor. You have hundreds of them sitting in your storage and feel like you won't ever run out. But what if you do? Well, you can exchange 40 time stones for 1 Valk's Cry. This deal isn't quite as good as the loot scroll one, but it's still a good way to get rid of your extra time stones before graduating. Now that we've clarified how valuable time stones are, we can start to estimate how much silver you can make in 1 hour of running rifts. Let's start with the time stones. I averaged 3,500 an hour. It means almost 12 loot scrolls or 88 Valk's cry. If we go with 200 million for the value of a loot scroll and 6 million for a Valk's cry, then this means 2.4 billion silver in loot scrolls or 520 million in Valks for every hour spent running rifts. I can already hear people typing frantically on their keyboard. Yes, in reality, you won't see these 2.4 billion silver for a long time, as it will require you to first reach the mid to end game. That's why I won't add the loot scrolls in my calculations, or else it would require me to subtract it once I start tracking my silver per hours later down the road. But giving these loot scroll no value wouldn't be fair either, so I'll let you decide for yourself how valuable loot scrolls are and whether or not these rifts are worth your time. As for myself, after grinding 1,000 hours of the early game, making at most 800 million an hour if I sold everything I got, I'd say it was definitely worth my time. Next we have crons. My philosophy doesn't align with the current best way of obtaining them. I do not think there is any difference between buying a costume with real money or having someone else do it for you. At the end of the day, you generated cron stones through the pearl shop. There was no real loss of silver, as the person selling the costume most likely didn't pay taxes on it. And so for this video and every video after it, I will value a crone at its blacksmith price. At the moment of recording, it means 3 million silver each. I averaged 97 an hour. That gives us 6,150 million silver total, or 292 million silver an hour. I'd like to add a bit about crons, but I'll come back to it later. Now on to sharps. This may vary based on your server or the moment you watch this video, but right now, on the NA server, each sharp sells for 1.5 million silver. If you have trouble selling your sharps, then you can turn them into concentrated magical blackstones. You'll probably make a bit more that way, but you should still check for yourself. I averaged 88 sharps an hour at 1.5 million per. That gives us 2,779 million silver total, or 132 million silver an hour. Last we have Valk's cry. I got 273 Valks total at an hypothetical value of 6 million each. That gives us 1,638 million silver total, or 78 million silver an hour, bringing the total silver per hour to 500 million. Again, this is without giving any silver value to the time-filled stones. I said earlier that I was going to come back on the crons. It's important to note that only the rare final boss or the bonus wave will reward you with Valk's Cry and crons. It means that if you run a few rifts but don't run into either, you will look at your inventory with confusion, as all you have gotten are time stones and sharps. In conclusion, running rifts can range from a good way of generating loot scrolls and make a bit of silver to being one of the most profitable activity in the game. As an example, the final hour of rift that we ran spawned a staggering total of 6 bonus waves and 6 rare bosses out of 45 rifts. The total made that hour was 3,818 time stones, 96 sharps, 241 crons, and 27 Valks, for a total of 1 billion silver without counting the 12 loot scrolls generated from the time stones. If you are interested in adding rifts to your routine, I suggest starting with the seasonal weeklies. While completing the weekly, you will most likely get rift fragments in addition to the echo from the quest. Do that until you accumulate 10 echoes and then recruit 4 other players with 10 echoes too. You will then use the first method I talked about earlier, running these one at a time, not using the relic but instead simply right-clicking the rift at the right location. Once you ran your 10 rifts, give the party lead to the next person and let them use theirs. By the end of the 50 rifts, you will have had decent odds of facing the rare boss and the bonus wave. It'll feel a lot better than running rifts one by one solo, continuously facing the same 3 bosses for what feels like an eternity. Remember that not everything you do in this game needs to be the most efficient use of your time. Some activities reward you with a feeling of accomplishment, even if others don't agree. You create your own experience in this vast world. Don't let anyone ruin your experience simply because you don't play this game the way they do. Don't forget to hydrate yourself. Stand up and stretch regularly. It's very important. Subscribe if you don't want to miss the next video. Drop a comment if you have any question, and I'll catch you later.